Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Slowly moving along, very slowly. Canto 11, Chapter 11, Text 3, and we'll start but not complete Text 4. Krishna speaking to Uddhava. O Uddhava, both knowledge and ignorance, being products of Maya, are expansions of my potency. Both knowledge and ignorance are beginningless and perpetually award liberation and bondage to embodied living beings. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation. O Uddhava, you should understand that both ignorance and knowledge are creations of my Maya, being expansions of my potency. They are beginningless and are the cause of living entities' bondage and liberation. Very similar. The BBT purport reads, by the expansion of vidya, or knowledge, a conditioned soul is liberated from the clutches of Maya, and similarly, by the expansion of avidya, or ignorance, the conditioned soul is driven further into illusion and bondage. Both knowledge and ignorance are products of the mighty potency of the personality of Godhead. The living being is bound by illusion when he considers himself the proprietor of the subtle and gross material bodies. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the living entity may be designated as Jiva Maya, whereas matter is called Guna Maya. The living entity places his living potency, or Jiva Maya, in the grip of the mundane qualitative potency, Guna Maya, and falsely dreams that he is part and parcel of the material world. Such an artificial mixture is called illusion or ignorance. When all the Lord's potencies are correctly perceived in their proper categories, the living entity is liberated from material bondage and returns to his blissful eternal residence in the spiritual sky. Paragraph. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is not different from his potencies, yet he is always above them. As the Supreme Controller, the Supreme Personality of Godhead may be designated as mukta, or liberated, only to indicate that he is eternally free from material contamination, and never to indicate that the Lord has been freed from actual entanglement in a material situation. According to Srila Madhvacharya, vidya indicates the goddess of fortune, the internal potency of the Lord, whereas avidya indicates Durga, the external potency of the Lord. Ultimately, however, the personality of Godhead can transform his potencies according to his own desire, as explained by Srila Prabhupada in his commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam 1.3.34, quote, because the Lord is the absolute transcendence, with a capital T, all of his forms, names, pastimes, attributes, associates, and energies are identical with him. His transcendental energy acts according to his omnipotency. The same energy acts as his external, internal, and marginal energies. And by his omnipotency, he can perform anything and everything through the agency of any of the above energies. He can turn the external energy into internal by his will. Paragraph. Srila Sridhar Swami notes in this regard that although the Lord has explained in the first verse of this chapter that the living entity is never actually in bondage, and therefore never actually liberated, one may apply the term bondage and liberation if one remembers that the living entity is eternally a transcendental fragment of the personality of Godhead. Further, one should not misinterpret the words Maya me venir mite to indicate that both material bondage and liberation are temporary states, being creations of the potency of the Lord. Interesting, huh? One should not misinterpret the words Maya me venir mite to indicate that both material bondage and liberation are temporary states. Really? Therefore, the term adye, or primeval and eternal, is used in this verse. The word vidya and avidya potencies, the vidya and avidya potencies of the Lord are stated to be creations of Maya, because they carry out the functions of the Lord's potencies. The vidya potency engages the living entity in the Lord's pastimes, whereas the avidya potency engages the living entities in forgetting the Lord and merging into darkness. Actually, both knowledge and ignorance are eternal alternatives of the marginal potency of the Lord, and in this sense, it is not incorrect to state that the living entity is either eternally conditioned or eternally liberated. The term venir mite, or produced, in this case indicates that the Lord expands his own energy as knowledge and ignorance, which display the functions of the Lord's internal and external potencies. Such potential exhibitions may appear and disappear in different times, places, and circumstances, but material bondage and spiritual freedom are eternal options of the marginal potency of the Lord. Seems contradictory to me. Let's see what happens. This is Bhaktisiddhanta's purport, short. The living entity, being the marginal energy of the Lord, can exist under the shelter of either knowledge or ignorance. When the living entity takes shelter of vidya, he remains in the liberated condition, and when he takes shelter of avidya, he remains in bondage. Vidya and avidya are two eternal energies of the Supreme Lord. Followers of Vishishta Advaita philosophy. Vishishta Advaita philosophy is Ramanujacharya. Followers of the Vishishta Advaita philosophy address the living entities as Chit and the material world as Achit. According to the Vedic statement, Yata Bhaso Yata Tamaha, Sri Jiva Goswami has described the living entities as Jiva Maya and matter as Guna Maya. It is the mistaken identification of the living entities with matter that causes illusory material existence or ignorance. When the living when the living entity can see himself as the superior potency of the Lord, giving up his misidentification with the inferior potency of matter, he can return to his blissful condition in the spiritual sky. And it's going to get a little more complicated. Pradhan is going to be introduced, because here it's saying Maya Shakti, or Maya Guna Maya, has the avidya potency. Now it's going to introduce Pradhan, because Pradhan is the source of Maya. So just different states of material nature, Prakriti. So let's hear. This is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, paraphrased by Bhaktisiddhanta. It may be questioned how Maya, being illusion, can influence the eternal spirit soul. Paragraph. No, it doesn't say when. It's how. The answer is that both knowledge and ignorance are two manifestations of the Lord's powerful energy, and which are the causes of liberation and bondage. Knowledge awards liberation and ignorance causes bondage, being creations of the eternal energy of the Lord. And let's note that being a creation doesn't mean it's chronological creation, but it's an ontological relationship. Being creations of the eternal energy of the Lord, knowledge and ignorance are beginningless, unlimited, and inexhaustible. In the Vedic literature, it is described that the Supreme Lord has an eternal energy known as Maya, which manifests in three features: Vidya, Avidya, ready? Pradhan. Just got more confusing. Pradhan creates the material world, right? Prakriti in the form of Pradhan. So Pradhan creates the material world. Avidya creates the conditioned soul's misconceptions, and Vidya removes those misconceptions and awards enlightenment. So those are three features of Krishna's Maya potency. Creates the world, covers the living entity, and relieves the living entity from misconceptions, and awards enlightenment. Those are three Maya potencies, or subdivisions, or features. Okay, here is Vishwanath's commentary. Question: what is this avidya by which the jiva develops a false relationship with the gunas? Answer: both vidya and avidya are my shaktis, or tanu. Tanu means body, by which liberation and bondage are produced. Vidya produces liberation, and avidya produces bondage for the embodied beings. These are created by my great Shakti, namely Maya. Moreover, because they are aspects of Maya, metaphorically, they are said to be created by Maya, but they are without beginning. Got it? They're potencies, but there's not a beginning to their existing as separate potencies, although they're potencies of Maya. That's not like they were manifested by Maya at some point in time. Maya is an ever-existing energy. These subdivisions are ever-existing subdivisions. And they may act this way, or they may act that way on the soul, and thus we say liberated condition, but it's, as we were using the language last couple of days, they're designations. They're not the soul proper. They're designations of the soul, impositions upon the soul. Then he quotes Bhagavatam 12:4-19. Prakriti is not subject to the 6 kinds of transformation caused by the influence of time. Rather, it has no birth, no death, no existence, no increase, no change, and no decrease. It is the cause of the universe. So categories of Sankhya and Sambandha and all those things. We're getting a close look at what Maya is and the subdivisions of Maya and how they're different than the living entity, although both are eternal. The energies are eternal, and sometimes this is manifest, sometimes that is manifest, and sometimes creation is manifest, but the potencies are eternal. Okay, last paragraph here. Medical scriptures also say, Pungsho sti prakriti nitya, or the prakriti of the Lord is eternal, like Maya, her modes, such as vidya and avidya, are eternal. Maya thus has three modes. What's that? Pradhan, avidya, and vidya. Pradhan creates the coverings, or the upadis, or the gross and subtle bodies, which are real. Avidya creates the imposition of the body, which is false. Vidya destroys the false identity. These are three products of the three aspects of Maya. So here's a reference to this verse found in 10th Canto, chapter 88. It's a discussion between Shukadeva Goswami and Parikshit about Vishnu worship. And here's the reference to this morning's text. So 1088.5. Shukadeva Goswami says, the Lord, however, has no connection with the material modes. He is the Supreme Lord, the all-seeing eternal witness, who is transcendental to material nature. One who worships him becomes similarly free from the material modes. Unquote. Now he shows, that's Shukadev, now he shows that Vishnu is without upadis, and established that this is the cause for attaining the highest goals. The cause is Vishnu is without upadis. He's supremely pure, and thus one can achieve higher and higher goals by association with Vishnu, serving Vishnu. He is not touched by the qualities of Prakriti, therefore he does not have any gunas. He is not covered by the three gunas like Shiva. This is because he is directly the Lord, or Purushaha. He is not like a reflection given powers at a distance. So, reflection. Think of a mirror showing a reflection, and there's some light in the mirror showing a reflection. If the mirror is even at a distance, or a lake, and at the distance of the lake you can see reflection of something, the sun or the moon or something, some light. Although it's just a reflection, there's still some energy in the reflection. Although it's not the full energy, it's just a reflection of that. So Vishnu is not a reflection of anything. He is the source of everything. He is not like a reflection given powers at a distance. The Lord says, in this morning's verse. O Uddhava, understand that vidya and avidya are my shaktis, unquote. He uses the word tanu, or body. Thus, sometimes one hears that Vishnu accepts sattva as his shakti. Who says that? Adi Shankara says that. Vishnu is Brahman covered by rarefied goodness. And that's his form, his tanu. So that's wrong. This is only in appearance, since Vishnu assists sattva only. He is directly the Lord. From him arises all knowledge that the Shaivite Brahmanas possess. Interesting. They're non-Vaishnava Brahmins. And one of the categories is Shaivite Brahmins. And Shaivite Brahmins have knowledge. So where does the knowledge of the Shaivite Brahmins arise from? Although they're worshippers of Shiva, it arises from Vishnu. And he is the witness of everything. That's Vishnu. Then, worshipping him, one also goes beyond the gunas. The person enjoys results beyond the gunas. He, Vishnu, is the husband of Lakshmi, and she is a Shakti arising from his Swarup. She is not dependent on Shiva. She defeats material wealth and powers. It will later be said, this is a commentary on text from chapter 88, chapter 89, verses 14-15, prayers by the personified Vedas, says, from Vishnu comes peace and fearlessness, the essential principles of religion, as well as detachment with knowledge, as well as the eightfold powers of mystic yoga, and his glorification, which cleanses the mind of all impurities. So he's beyond the modes. He's not possessed of a body of goodness. Some persons interpret that way. It's a misunderstanding. It's incorrect. He's not covered by goodness, a form of rarefied goodness. No. Okay, now we're going to Jiva Goswami's Krama Sandarbha. And I think that's it for this morning. Yeah. It's half a page. Translation of this morning's verse. Oh, Uddhava, understand that vidya and avidya are my shaktis. They are created by my maya. They are without beginning, and they create liberation and bondage for the living beings. Commentary. Krama Sandarbha. How ignorance takes place is explained. Although I am liberated eternally, I appear to be bound up. How can both states occur simultaneously? That is explained. Vidya and avidya, which are without beginning, they are Maya's own expanded form, which demonstrate her nature. Vidya and avidya spread out by my Maya Shakti. They are situated as causes of liberation and bondage for the jivas. Sharirinam. Maya is a devotee, like Yamaraj. Interesting comparison. And then he quotes from this Bhayam Datviyam Abhiniveshitaksyat verse, 11th canto, chapter 2. his translation here. For the jiva averse to the Lord, there will be samsara, consisting of identity with body and lack of identity with the soul, because of his absorption in the material coverings on the soul arising from the Lord's Maya. That's this third pradhan feature, manifest forms or manifest universe, then vidya and avidya. Interesting. Therefore, the intelligent person taking Guru as his Lord and very self should fully worship the Lord with pure bhakti. And then he quotes Panini. Panini. When a jiva is opposed to me, ignorance spreads out and causes bondage. And this is still his commentary, by the way. Jiva Goswami's. When a jiva is opposed to me, ignorance spreads out and causes bondage, avidya, while covering the jiva's swarup. When a jiva becomes favorable to me, vidya manifests the swarup of the jiva and causes liberation, while discarding the covering of gunas. Maya is the controller of vidya and avidya, but operates because of me. And then this Panini reference is just, how the composition of the Sanskrit. Let's take a look at some pictures. This is an interesting picture. Check it out. She looks like she's got a big sika. And the other one's got a lot of books in her head. Okay. Uddhava. Both knowledge and ignorance, being products of Maya, are expansions of my potency. Both knowledge and ignorance are beginningless and perpetually award liberation and bondage to embodied living beings. Where did she find that picture? So knowledge looks like the lady on the right, and ignorance looks like the lady on the left. And they're both, that knowledge and ignorance are products of Maya. And Maya, the two are expansions of Krishna's potency, because Maya is his potency. Both knowledge and ignorance are beginningless and perpetually award liberation and bondage to embodied living beings. Next. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is not different from his potencies. Yet, he is always above them as the Supreme Controller. The Supreme Personality of Godhead may be designated as mukta, or liberated, only to indicate that he is eternally free from material contamination, and never to indicate that the Lord has been freed from actual entanglement in a material situation. Another interesting graphic. By the way, at the bottom, that little signboard says avidya, and up top is vidya. So there's a balloon lifting that fellow and an anchor pulling him down. Really creative. And you see it looks like the anchor also has avidya written in it. Okay. The vidya and avidya potencies of the Lord are stated to be creations of Maya because they carry out the functions of the Lord's potencies. The vidya potency engages the living entities in the Lord's pastimes, whereas the avidya potency engages living entities in forgetting the Lord and merging into darkness. Now the next image is from the next verse, and we're not going to have time for the next verse. But the images are nice. I'll just do one. It's a nice image. Just as the sun reveals itself through its own light, or covers itself by creating clouds, the personality of Godhead reveals and covers himself by knowledge and ignorance, which are expansions of his potency. Okay. Remember what the question was? This is chapter 11. In the end of chapter 10, Uddhava wants to know, sometimes the same living entity is Nitya, Bada, Nitya, Siddha. How's that? So it's, the question specifically has to do with the word Nitya. And Krishna's answer is that the question is misleading. Because the living entity is neither. So this situation of Nitya Bada Nitya Siddha, they're products of Maya, which is not the living entity. Living entity and Maya are not the same. So the living entity can be influenced this way or can be influenced that way. And then the third feature of Maya is Pradhan, or that creates the material world and creates bodies and gross and subtle coverings. That's a Maya feature. And they're all impositions or designations, or it's not the living entity. So the question itself is misleading. If it's misleading, then why use those terminologies? Well, because it's indicating a temporary situation. We use terminology all the time to indicate something that's temporary. And it's a temporary situation. Although the potencies are eternal. And the potencies are acting according to the Lord's in charge of Maya, right? Maya Jakshena Prakriti. Suyate Sacharacharam. So then comes this question that Roshni was asking. Someone was asking. The free will question. Who was asking that question? Roshni. So her question was specific to some living entities have a long-standing relationship with Krishna where, like, Dantavakra previously was, Vijay. So he went back to being Vijay. So he got liberation because he was Vijay. But other living entities don't seem to have that kind of history with the Lord. So what about, do they just they get liberation whether they want it or not? Is there free will involved in all of that? Remember that question? So there's an interaction between the personality of Godhead and living entities. And one of the interactions is it's his potency, and by his potencies act according to his indication. So some living entities are covered. They're covered when they turn their attention away, bahirmukha. And some living entities are turning by sadhana, they're turning their attention to Krishna. So then he reciprocates. Not just sadhana, but living entities have various material desires. I'm engaged in a conversation with somebody about that. Does the thief get intelligence from Super Soul? Anyone, anything comes from Super Soul. Anything within the field of material energy. It's under his adhyaksha. And then there's this very special case where the Lord doesn't have to have a reason, or reciprocating with living entities, sadhana or something. He can grant liberation. So the original condition of the soul is remained when the covering is removed. And he can do like that. And what's the cause? Because everything, we're used to something has a cause. Well, his causeless mercy is the cause. And it's part of the potency of Krishna that when he kills, they're liberated. So let's go get killed by Krishna because we'll get liberation. No, we'll cultivate favorable. That's bhakti. It gives more than liberation. It gives loving service. So, the how can one living entity be simultaneously, or not simultaneously, that's time, can be designated as eternally liberated or eternally conditioned? So I think we're getting a little bit of the picture. A little bit. Let's see if there's some discussion.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So here today's class we understand that Maya has like three like the avidya
features was the word that was used in the translation.
Yeah.
Three
so
features.
The feature of vidya is here is it refers to mode of goodness, or because transcendental knowledge is a one liberate the soul?
But you just got very confused in your question. The question itself is confusing because mode of goodness is not transcendental knowledge.
Yeah. So that's why
So to ask your question again with better, more careful choice of words.
Okay.
Ask your question again.
So I was I understood that Maya has three features, which is vidya, avidya.
Do you want to know, is the vidya potency equal to the mode of goodness? That's your question?
Yes.
That's your question?
Yeah.
Well, one who has the mode of goodness is more receptive to vidya. But one can be covered and be a receiver of vidya. Isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Dry wood is going to more quickly burn than wet wood. But fire is not dependent upon, it's not created by the dry wood. Fire is another energy or entity than the wood itself, or the burning of the wood. So don't try to mix things.
Okay. So I'm trying to understand that the vidya here, it refers to
A potency of Krishna, a sub-potency of Maya, which is Krishna's potency, that acts on a living entity to remove misconceptions and bring liberation. It's a potency of Krishna that does that.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. It's a clarification question. So my understanding is Maya is the potency of Krishna, and Maya has three products. So in the commentary, many places it's mentioned those products are created but no beginning. So the question is, anything which is created has a beginning and end. But the commentary kept going back and forth, created products but no beginning.
It's language, and language has limitations. So we had this question one of the classes. What's an event that's not in time? Remember that question? So Balaram is Krishna's first expansion. It's not an event in time. So these potencies, one can say created by Maya, but they're not created by Maya. They're sub-potencies of Maya. They're features of that which is eternal. And sometimes they may be manifest and sometimes not manifest, but the potencies are eternal potencies or sub-potencies of the one that's eternal, Maya. And Maya can be manifest and withdrawn as well. Okay?
One more clarification, Maharaj. I really liked Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's commentary that made really a good understanding for me. That Maya's two products, the Vidya and Avidya.
Maya does what?
Maya's two features, the Vidya and Avidya. If a living entities take shelter of Avidya, then they are in bondage.
Yeah.
And then they take shelter of Vidya, it's
yes.
liberated. That gave me some nice clarity. I just wanted to comment on it. Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Well, saying the same thing a different way, which I'm accustomed to saying, from the Vedas teach that the root cause of suffering is ignorance. It's not that the living entity, by nature, by constitution, is ignorant. But suffering, the root cause of suffering is ignorance that covers the living entity. And that can be removed by knowledge, or the vidya potency. Therefore, knowledge is valued in the world. It's valued in the Vedas. And then comes, knowledge alone is not enough. Because why? Because there's still a tendency in the living entity to want to be a separate enjoyer, which is avidya. And then one becomes covered by avidya. If there's that tendency, overcomes the vidya tendency, or the being connected to Krishna tendency. Anything else?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. We understand from Bhagavad Gita that...
You got to speak a little louder.
We understand from Bhagavad Gita that Daivihi eshu gunamayi mama maya dhuratyaya.
Right.
So we always, at least my thought is always, we have to stay away from Maya and embrace Krishna, or surrender to Krishna. Now with this concept of Maya having two features, it's a little bit confusing to me.
Why?
Maya has the Vidya feature and Maya has the Avidya feature. So you have to... so how do we understand?
It's very simple. We're not after Vidya. We're after Krishna.
So Vidya just comes as...
You're not eager for Vidya. We're not eager for Maya. We're staying away. That's one of the key verses in Brahma's prayers. Jnane prayasam udapasya. Throw it away. Trying to get liberation through jnana, or through cultivation of vidya. Well, we say, suffering, the root cause of suffering is ignorance, and knowledge is the antidote. It's not, it's temporal. It's impermanent. It's another feature of Maya. So we're not cultivating vidya. We're not gyanis cultivating vidya and trying to get, freed from suffering by cultivation of knowledge. That's not our program. We revere knowledge, but knowledge that's of another category than the temporal one, the Maya one, the Maya product one. We don't want. We want to become free from misconceptions. We don't want to be laboring under misconceptions and illusion. But we're not taking shelter of Vidya to get there. We're taking shelter of Krishna to get there. So beware of the tendency to ignore Krishna and take shelter of knowledge separate from Krishna to get happiness and relief from misery. And
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
it's just a refined understanding of the very simple understanding. We're wary of Maya, and we want Krishna. Anything? Online?
There is one question.
Okay, let's hear. We're just following Lal Gopal in his suggestion. It's a nice suggestion.
Okay. Hare Krishna Maharaj. So the question,
You got it.
okay, the question is by Shalini Talwar. Snehavali Devidasi.
Yes.
Oops. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. This verse is definitely contradictory. If knowledge is created by Maya, how is this knowledge different from the chit potency of the Lord?
Well, that's easy. You could have made it more difficult for me. The chit potency is not of the temporal realm. The chit potency is of the eternal realm. And the vidya potency, there's overlaps or similarities, or places where they're similar and places where they're dissimilar. But chit potency is not a product of Maya. The vidya potency is the product of Maya. A product of Maya, or an aspect or function of Maya, I mean, it's like this slide here. That's the sun gives light, but the sun also creates clouds, so you can't see the light. The vidya and avidya potencies, they're like, the light of the sun. And then the chit potency can be likened to the light of the sun, but it's not anything material. I don't see the contradiction. Maybe you can express it differently, but I don't see a contradiction. Chit potency is of the spirit, is the chit shakti, spiritual, and avidya is not. They're different potencies, and one is a product of Maya, and what the other is not. More?
She had a second part.
Okay.
She asks, secondly, how can the living entity identify with the superior potency of the Lord if knowledge is also created by Maya?
Go ahead.
We know
No,
that
read the sentence again. She's her language is important.
Okay.
Slowly.
How can the living entity identify with the superior potency of the Lord if knowledge is also created by Maya?
Because same. There's a distinction between, you could say theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge. Jnana and Vijnana. Theoretical, Jnana, Vijnana, practical knowledge. So if it's not just a notional identification, I belong to the superior potency. Check the box. And then one's still in illusion. I mean, one is in less illusion than if one is thinking, I am a product of the material energy. And one can have a theoretical understanding, I'm part of the superior, so I can identify myself, at least for a little while, in that way. But it's not the same as the realization of being, enlightened and connected with Krishna's spiritual potency by practical engagement and service. Next sentence.
So she said, how can the living entity identify? And then, so if knowledge is also created by Maya, we know that knowledge and detachment are byproducts of bhakti. Could you please clarify?
Yeah, it's a different kind of knowledge and detachment, that's all. Different kind of knowledge and detachment. There's a semblance of the real thing found in the material world. The knowledge and detachment of the material world. And then there's the real thing. That's not a semblance, it's the real thing. And that real thing is, in loving service to Krishna, then that's the real thing, because that's who we are, and it's not a reflection or shadow or impermanent. It's permanent. Okay, we're done. You have something?
Just a comment, Maharaj. Thank you so much for. It was very nice, especially this 11 chapter. It was so deep, profound.
We're not done yet.
Yeah, I know. The starting, just 3 texts is like so deeper, and I feel like it's good. Like I didn't miss the class. So it was very helpful to me. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada ki jai.